When Vladimir Putin first invaded Ukraine, he believed one thing above all else: armor is everything. Tanks were supposed to be his unstoppable weapon. The roar of engines, the grinding steel, and the endless waves of armored vehicles rolling across the Ukrainian plains were meant to break the enemy's will. It almost worked, almost. But that illusion has shattered. Because today, Russia, once home to the largest tank army on Earth, is scraping the bottom of its rusted barrel. The mighty Kremlin is now sending rotting Soviet relics into battle. Vehicles so old and broken that they're more museum pieces than machines of war. This is the story of how the world's biggest tank power became a scrapyard army, and how Ukraine's relentless strikes turned Putin's greatest strength into his greatest weakness. In the early days of the war, Putin threw everything he had at Ukraine. Convoys of tanks and armored fighting vehicles poured across the border. He believed sheer quantity could crush resistance. But he underestimated two things: the power of modern drone warfare, and Ukraine's determination to survive. When Russia began losing ground, Putin doubled down. More armor, more tanks, more fire, was the Kremlin's thinking. The result? Catastrophe. Ukraine didn't just repel those assaults, it destroyed them. Entire armored columns vanished under barrages of anti-tank missiles, artillery, and drone-guided strikes. And the more armor Russia sent, the more it lost. Soon, Putin's so-called Iron Wall was nothing but twisted wreckage spread across hundreds of miles of Ukrainian soil. Now, as of late 2025, Russia's desperation is fully visible from space. Satellite images reveal what's happening at the 111th Central Tank Reserve Base in Kostroma, Russia. Once a proud storage hub of Soviet might, it now looks like a graveyard. Rows upon rows of corroded tanks and infantry fighting vehicles sit exposed to the snow, rain, and rust. The Kremlin has ordered its engineers to bring them back to life. But the truth is brutal: most are beyond repair. What was once a stronghold of armored power is now a scrapyard of decay. Entire tanks are being cannibalized, torn apart so a few usable parts can be salvaged to fix others. For every one vehicle sent to the front line, 2 or 3 others must be dismantled. Russia is literally eating its own past just to keep its army crawling forward. And even then, what rolls out of the factory gates is a shadow of what it once was. How did it come to this? The answer lies in one of Russia's oldest mistakes: storing its armor outdoors. For decades, Moscow left thousands of tanks and vehicles sitting in open fields, unprotected from the brutal winters and harsh rains. The result: deep corrosion, broken engines, destroyed electronics, and armor so weakened it might crumble under its own weight. Analysts estimate that many of these vehicles have been rotting for 30 to 40 years. Some are from the 1970s, others even older. When Russia tries to revive them, it finds only rust. One report said it takes an average of 3 dead vehicles to build one barely functional one. A base with 5,000 stored IFVs, infantry fighting vehicles, might only produce 1,600 working machines, and even those can be destroyed by a single drone strike. Putin's army is fighting with corpses of the Soviet Union. This storage disaster dates back to the Soviet era. Back then, the Red Army's doctrine was built around mass. It believed in having more tanks than anyone else, not necessarily better ones. Shelters and maintenance were luxuries, not priorities. As a result, when the USSR collapsed, it left behind mountains of rusting metal. For years, these stockpiles were sold off to other countries or forgotten. And that's the real irony: the best equipment, the ones still in good condition, were sold to foreign allies for a quick profit. So when Putin launched his full-scale invasion in 2022, the Kremlin discovered a cruel truth: its supposed reserves were an illusion. The mighty tank empire had rotted away long ago. Let's look at the scale of this collapse. According to Ukraine's Ministry of Finance, since the start of the war, Russia has lost over 11,240 tanks and 23,324 armored fighting vehicles. That's nearly 35,000 armored machines destroyed or captured, a number so massive it's hard to imagine. And what can Russia build to replace them? Only 250 new T-90 tanks per year, and around 463 modern IFVs. That's not even 10% of what they lose annually. It's like trying to refill an ocean with a teacup. So, Russia turns to the past, reviving ancient T-62s, T-55s, and even vehicles older than most of its soldiers. But these tanks aren't built for today's battlefield. A Ukrainian drone costing a few $1,000s can burn them to ash in seconds. The situation at the 111th Central Tank Reserve Base is just one example. All across Russia, the story is the same: rusting hulls, empty shells, and skeletons of war machines. In Crimea, Ukrainian partisans reported abandoned vehicles rotting under the sun, with guards sleeping on duty or drinking to escape the boredom. In Sevastopol, reconnaissance showed destroyed vehicles left untouched for months. A small inspection of 61 Russian T-80 tanks revealed that 44 were completely unusable: broken guns, failed electronics, ruined engines. Only 1 in 3 tanks could even move, and even those working tanks often malfunction mid-battle. Many Russian soldiers now call their own vehicles metal coffins. By 2025, Russia's military strategy has completely changed, not by choice, but by necessity. The great armored offensives that once defined Russian warfare are now impossible. There's simply not enough equipment left. In the summer of 2025, for the first time in years, Russia's tank losses dropped, not because of success, but because it barely had any tanks left to lose. Instead of tank assaults, Russian soldiers are now fighting on foot, using infantry waves instead of mechanized columns. It's a throwback to World War I, a grim, desperate tactic born of exhaustion. The Institute for the Study of War estimates that Russia will completely deplete its usable armor stockpiles by the end of 2025. Even though reports say Russia still technically has 46% of its pre-war tanks, most are beyond repair. They exist only on paper, ghosts of steel. Russia's solution to this crisis borders on tragic comedy. First, it's trying to ramp up new production, hundreds of tanks, missiles, and aircraft by the end of 2025. But the numbers still don't add up. Then came the drones. Inspired by Ukraine's success, Russia began mass-producing Garin, Harpy, and FPV drones, hoping quantity could replace quality. But drones can't replace tanks in ground warfare, they can only assist. So the Kremlin took another desperate step, selling its own destroyed tanks for scrap metal. According to United 24, Russia has auctioned off the burnt shells of T-80s, T-72s, and IFVs for around $40,000 to $50,000 each. It's a grim symbol of how far things have fallen, from building the most feared tanks on Earth to selling their carcasses for cash. And when even that didn't help, Russia went back further in history, to horses. In October 2025, United 24 reported something unbelievable: Russian forces had revived cavalry units. Soldiers on horseback, carrying rifles, riding across muddy fields like it was the 19th century. It was desperation in motion, a move so absurd it bordered on tragic. Within hours, Ukrainian drones spotted them, and in seconds, the skies rained death. The mounted soldiers stood no chance. They were wiped out almost instantly. Still, the mere fact that Russia even tried this shows how far its once proud military has fallen. Putin's war machine isn't just crumbling on the battlefield, it's rotting from within. Poor logistics, corruption, outdated systems, and decades of neglect have turned what was once a global superpower into a hollow empire. Russia's army now fights with the weapons of the past, led by a mindset trapped in history. Its soldiers march into battle with broken armor and dying hope. Its leaders pretend victory is near, even as their empire decays piece by piece. And all the while, Ukraine is smaller, outnumbered, but unbroken, continues to dismantle the Russian army one vehicle at a time. Let's summarize the devastation. 11,240 Russian tanks destroyed. 23,324 armored vehicles lost. Over 30,000 Soviet-era machines gone. 250 new tanks built per year, only 8% of losses replaced. Storage bases 50% empty, the rest rusting away. Half of all pre-war reserves unusable or scrapped. These aren't just statistics, they are evidence of an empire slowly bleeding out. From the outside, Russia still claims power. It showcases parades, displays mock victories, and spreads propaganda of new offensives. But satellite images and battlefield data tell the real story: a military collapsing under its own weight. Even now, Putin's generals fake victories. In the Ukrainian village of Verbov, Russia announced liberation, but Ukrainian forces had already driven them out. This fake victory, like many others, was broadcast across state media to mask the truth. Russia is running out of tanks, out of soldiers, and out of time. For decades, Russia's identity was built around its tanks. From the legendary T-34s of World War II to the modern T-90s, they were symbols of power, pride, and fear. But today, that legacy lies rusting in the mud. Putin's army has become a museum of failure, its weapons decayed, its soldiers demoralized, its strategy broken. What began as a show of might has turned into a desperate struggle for survival. And in the process, the world has witnessed something historic: the slow, painful death of the Russian war machine. The story of Russia's collapsing armor is more than just about metal and machines, it's about arrogance, miscalculation, and decay. Putin believed tanks would win him a war. Instead, they buried his ambitions under mountains of rust. Ukraine's courage and innovation, especially in drone warfare, didn't just stop the invasion. They rewrote the rules of modern combat. And now, every broken tank, every rusted IFV, every desperate cavalry charge tells the same story, that no empire, no matter how mighty, can survive when it builds its future on the crumbling steel of the past. The rot runs deep, and for Putin's army, the end has already begun.